In 2024, in the last semester of my college experience, I was only taking one art class, and it was primarily self-guided, which meant that what I was doing was following a project through the end and not necessarily learning from a teacher about anything else. This meant that I was guiding myself in teaching and needing to learn how to do things on my own, which obviously I was able to do before, but in this case, everything I wanted to learn from this point onwards was self-guided. And so I turned to what I knew would assist me the most, and that was doing studies of things I wanted to learn how to be better at. And as per usual, I started posting about this experience online, primarily on TikTok. And initially I started out with hands and limbs and sceneries, and I branched out into movie scenes and then just faces and portraits, all of which are things I have drawn before or tried to draw before, so not exactly the newest material, but definitely practice I needed desperately. And I hadn't realized up until doing that my artwork improved so much, my critical eye improved so much from doing all of these studies. Because while I logically knew that doing studies was the best way and most efficient way to learn how to draw something or learn how to draw better, I had never really put that into practice. Which, quite frankly, is embarrassing for someone who went through 4 years of art school, you know? That's like a minute detail I should have thought about. But when you're in school or you're in lessons, it doesn't really occur to you to think about doing things in your own time, and I am someone who has been in and out of lessons my entire life. So learning and studying on my own was something I logically knew how to do because I had done it so often in classes, but never really on my own. And this led me to the realization, especially when posting online about it, that a lot of people don't seem to understand the purpose of studies or why they should do them. And while it's certainly not my place to tell you what to do, I do think it is so beneficial to do studies and try to improve your artwork before even trying to invest in things like style or excessive supplies or even trying to move on to other mediums. I mean, there's a reason all good art classes start off with teaching you the fundamentals and basics of artwork. The still life put in front of you is not there for no reason. When I initially started, I was doing a lot of vague sceneries and hands, and these were not detailed and they were all under an hour. And this was primarily because I was just getting into the groove and habit of doing studies every so often. But now, and like with this current speed paint, I am taking John Singer Sargent's self-portrait and inserting myself into it. And that is how studies get transformed over time. The initial goal is always going to be how to learn how to do something, whereas inevitably you get to do what it is you want to do because you have studied how to do it. I think it's agreed upon that most people are not born magical artists. Like, we have to learn so much in order to do anything that we want to achieve. But in order to do that, we also have to confront this idea that we do not know automatically how to draw everything, even when we get to a certain intermediate level of artistry. And when we want to get better at certain things, we do have to try and practice doing them. And that means breaking it down and doing simpler steps. For example, I struggle a lot with drawing fully rendered illustrations because I struggle with backgrounds. So rather than focusing on drawing the background of one painting repeatedly until I perfect it, I could take a couple hours and draw multiple backgrounds so I have more experience and more knowledge of how I would want things to appear. Studies are a low-pressure way of learning how to do something without actually having to apply it to something you feel very deeply about. And by that I mean your final painting you want to look perfect. I like to think of them as a way to level up your skills before you're actually facing the final boss. The final boss being whatever big idea you have floating around in your head. By doing all of these studies, you get to get the building blocks and all of the armor and weaponry and potions and mana and food and whatever it is you're looking for within your artwork to become the most powerful version of yourself who is now ready to take on this big project, aka the boss. And I think that people recognize that, but when they sit down and do studies, I don't think they understand the most effective or necessarily the most useful way to do them. Because while all methods are good, some methods can help streamline your workflow and make your life a lot easier than others. And in that case, I want to explain it a little bit more. In my opinion, the best way to start a study is to set a timer. Once you have figured out what it is you want to draw, whether that be a person, a scenery, an environment, a character, hands, feet, limbs, weapons, armor, whatever it is, you sit down with your setup, you get ready, and you set an hour-long timer. And you don't check the time. But what you do is keep in mind that there is a time limit on what you're doing, and your goal is to finish whatever it is you're trying to draw and make it look like the object without taking up too many hours of your time. And the reasoning behind this is because studies are something that can easily be overworked. In order to prevent that, your goal should be to finish something within a limited time span. My range is from 30 minutes to 1 hour, after which point I give up and try again another day. And with this next portrait, I want to go a little more in depth in the actual steps I took to create it. One of my goals right now is learning how to draw men more accurately and correctly. It seems like every time I draw anything, I'm more geared towards drawing women than I am to men, and I don't think that's necessarily good for my growth as an artist, so I have been trying to draw men more often. So this means I'm starting off with men's portraits in my artwork. So I found a photo on Pinterest that seemed to appeal to me of this model. And with this study, I started off with doing a rough sketch just to map out everything because this is something that is less innate to me in drawing. When drawing myself or drawing women, I tend to be more comfortable with the actions I'm taking with my brush stroke, whereas I am far less comfortable and far less knowledgeable about drawing masculine features. The sketch only took a few minutes, after which I opened a layer underneath and put in my base colors. I really wanted to focus on mapping out the darks and lights before I got into rendering, especially because I knew there would be no way for me to make this as perfect as I possibly could because I was on a time limit. This was a half-an-hour study and I did take about 31 minutes to complete it, and again, because of this time limit, I wanted to set myself up for success later by creating these lights and shadows and base colors early on so I would spend less time on correcting them later. And then I created a layer on top of both of these layers, on top of that sketch and my base colors, and started doing what I would call rendering for my artwork. And I'm not sure if you can tell, but I'm trying to do a mixture of color picking and also color wheel adjustments rather than picking from the image. Although I obviously do pick a couple of colors from the image itself to make my life a little more easy when I can't particularly figure out what color is on screen. And I don't necessarily suggest that because it is a crutch to rely on, but I also don't ever think someone should stop themselves from seeking any sort of digital assistance when it is available easily to them. And at this point, I just end up doing a lot of adjustments and adding in more details because now I am just following what it is that I am visually seeing within that reference image. And to be perfectly honest, during this I knew the face was off center and I knew it was not tilted correctly, but like I said already, I was running out of time, so there wasn't necessarily the greatest amount of time I could use to fix all of that. And since my goal is never a picture perfect copy of what it is I'm studying, I'm not too worried about it, especially since I know if I put more time and effort into this, I could have made it match almost perfectly. With all of that being said, at the end of the day, studying anything is a labor of love for your craft. If you are choosing to invest more time and energy into learning more skills within your craft, you are pushing labor into it. And thankfully, the great thing about that is there is payoff. You will see immediate improvement. It will be almost overnight. It's almost crazy how fast the improvement is. And the great thing about studies is there is no one way to do them. You can do picture studies, you can do live studies, you can do sketches, you can do anything from very detailed ones to very vague breakdowns of something. But no matter what it is you're doing, as long as you are studying correctly what you are seeing and working towards that goal, you are going to see improvement. And this is true regardless of whether you are self-taught or you went to art school like me. So in the future, since I will no longer be in school for art making, I will continue to make these studies for as long as I can to make sure I am still maintaining and improving the skills I have achieved already. Studies are absolutely your closest friend when you are wanting to improve your skills at art making, and you should not deny them the existence in your life that you may have been doing up until now. And who knows? If you give it a try, you might find out that the results are so worth it that you will continue to do them of your own accord.